2 minute updates from me before we dive into listen to our friends from Australia because it's very late for them at night. Here's an update from me. So as of today, we have on the left, you see the picture I showed 3 months ago when we had our previous global catch-up meeting. So today we are 1,200 graduates from 30 countries. And the new joiners are I have 2 new master facilitators from Portugal. They are in the next picture. So they are Francois and Anna from Portugal. I'm not going to list all the others. All the others have been announced previously. So welcome to Francois and Anna for Portugal. And of course, welcome to all the other master facilitators we already have. And I will dive right in. This time I'm going to try some chit chat at the end. So we'll see how that goes. Okay. But we're going to start right away with the first case study. And before I give over the microphone to Don and Sarah from Australia, I want to remind all of you, because maybe not all of you are using this every single day, that we now have 2 main reports, 2 main surveys that lead to 2 main reports, right? We have on the left what I now call TPS for Team. This is the one all of you are familiar with. This is what we used during the certification program. Right now, we have 527 surveys for teams. Then we have on the right-hand side what I now call TPS for Leader. This is new. This is about 1 year old now, but as you can see in the numbers, and the numbers look almost the same, but that has nothing to do with it because the teams on the left-hand side have nothing to do with the leaders on the right-hand side. But we have more than 500 leaders where we assessed their impact on the psychological safety in their team. If you have not seen the report because that is possible you have not seen that yet, you can contact your master facilitator to ask for information. And I give you that introduction because, for example, in the first case study, we will hear from Sarah and Don. They will talk about both. They are using both types of reports. So I thought it was useful to make that distinction or remind you of that distinction. Okay. With that, Sarah and Don are, I can say that I think, master facilitators couple. We have a few master facilitators couple. They work together in business and in life. And so they volunteered to share the case study of a project that is going on right now in Australia. So Sarah and Don, I can see both of them. What we will do before I hand over, I'm going to stop sharing and they will start sharing. But I will also tell you that at the end of their session explanation. So what we do is if you have any questions or comments, I suggest you put them in the chat box so that as soon as their explanation ends, we can answer a few of the questions or look at the comments you've had, right? So no need to wait for everything to be finished. What we will also do after Sarah and Don have finished their sharing is to take the usual group picture. So I just let you know that you have about 10-15 minutes to be at your best. Okay, with that, Sarah and Don, I can see both of you. I'm going to stop sharing.
Hello, everybody. It's evening here in Australia, as Peter said. We've been working for the last several months with an organisation called Fire and Rescue New South Wales, which is the largest urban firefighting organisation in the Southern Hemisphere. And we've done a little bit of work with TPS, as we'll get to in a minute. I'll get straight into it. Getting comments. Has everyone seen the slide change? We're moving through the slides now, are we? Yep. Okay. Yeah. So Fire and Rescue New South Wales, a little bit of information about the organisation that we're working with. They've got about 12,500 people in a range of full-time, part-time, uniform, civilian and volunteers. Annual budget about $1 million. Sorry, did someone say something? No. Okay, I'm getting some echo. An annual budget of about $1 billion Australian. And internally, they have several different directorates and functions. The Commissioner's Office, field operations, which is the majority of the firefighters, so the significant majority of the workforce is there. Strategic capability, which is about providing some strategic support services like training and HR. Operational and strategic services in red, which is the group we're working with. People and culture, IT, and media and comms. We're working, as I said, with operational and strategic services, which is a division within Fire and Rescue New South Wales. And it's made up of a team of teams, essentially. The operational strategic services, fleet management, it manages all the properties of Fire and Rescue. Enterprise portfolio management, which is a lot of corporate services, government audit, risk and legal. It also has two functions that didn't have teams. They have a small number of specialist people, so they were not included in our teamwork. And but we worked separately with them in a coaching capacity. So there's essentially 5 teams, and the 5 teams were the senior executive team or the senior leadership team, and all their subordinate teams. And over 11-month program, our brief was to strengthen the senior leadership team and the 4 subordinate teams that I pointed out in the previous slide, and to bridge a leadership gap across OSS. Essentially, too many people are working at too low a level, and the gap between the senior leadership team and their subordinate teams is too great. The program itself comprises a range of 2-day workshops face-to-face at approximately 4-month intervals with both the senior leadership team and their subordinate teams. Virtual sessions for both the senior leadership and the subordinate teams, and some coaching sessions for the senior leadership team. So it's essentially a combination of team strengthening and leadership development. We applied TPS for team and TPS for leader surveys for both the executive leadership team, which comprises 7 people, and all of their first report management teams. We've done the pre-program surveys, and sometime early next year, at the conclusion of the program, we're going to do post-program surveys for both TPS for teams and TPS for leaders. The OSS senior leadership teams, as I said, comprises 7 people, and the 4 subordinate teams that we surveyed are fleet management, property services, enterprise portfolio management, and the government audit, risk and legal. They're very diverse teams with very different functions, and the feature of OSS is that it's pretty much a catch-all for all the support services around actual firefighting. Summary of observations. So the things that we've observed and some lessons that we've learned over the period of time we've been working with them, which is coming up to about 4 months now. Firstly, the administration of the surveys themselves. One of the things that worked really well is that we made it very clear that the TPS survey is a very clear indicator of team effectiveness, and we linked psychological safety to team learning and to team performance along the lines as per this slide that Peter included in one of the teaching packs. This was useful for teams because initially they thought that psychological safety was a little bit too fluffy, didn't seem to be gritty and based on performance. Once we explained the connection between psychological safety and performance, teams generally came along very willingly on the journey of the TPS surveys. We needed to give very clear instructions for the selection of respondents. One of the things that many of the teams were unsure of was who was eligible to respond to the surveys. Some of the teams, I should say, had people that were temporary. They were filling in, temporarily appointed in the teams. And so we went through a process of negotiation to clarify who should be included in the team surveys and who wouldn't. It's not as straightforward as you might think. Certainly in this organisation, there's a lot of fluidity about who's in and who's not in a team. We always need to follow up. I don't think this is unique to Australia, or maybe it is. Maybe Australians are just very laid back and don't pay attention to deadlines. But we had to follow up a lot, and Peter will tell you that he sent lots of very helpful reminders to us so that we were on their backs getting them to respond. They generally do, but it takes a little bit of reminding. One of the most powerful things that we got from the survey was the pattern recognition. There were some really interesting patterns that certainly came up as a result of us using not just the TPS for Teams survey, but using it in combination with the TPS for Leader survey. What we noticed was that one of the most important aspects was the verbatim comments at the end of both the TPS for Leader and TPS for Teams. Most of the surveys, the responses that we got, had some particular language that potentially, and in some cases almost certainly, would have identified the people that made those comments. So what we started to do was to use AI to help us convert those comments from verbatim into themes. This is an example before you of just that. The themes came out really strongly. We checked them all. We didn't just take it for granted from AI. And with a little bit of tweaking, we were really happy with the clarity of the themes that came out of the verbatim comments. But the main thing was to make sure that anonymity was protected and nobody could guess the identity of anyone that made the comments. Where the comments did not indicate a particular identity, we left the comments as they were. But if there is an identifier that you might see in some of the responses, this worked well for us and it might work well for some of the others. The TPS Leader Survey indicates some really good insights into how the teams might also be reacting to the leadership. We all know that the foundations of psychological safety, one of which is leader behaviour, is a very strong driver of team psychological safety. So we were keen to explore the connections between TPS for leader and TPS for teams. For example, in the TPS for leader survey, you get diagrams like this that indicate where the team average was in the grey boxes, where the leaders rated themselves in the purple diamonds. And what we found quite often was that the leaders quite consistently either rated themselves lower or higher than their team. In this case, for example, the leader rated themselves clearly and significantly lower than the rest of the team. And we were curious to see whether or not that might indicate something like imposter syndrome, where they didn't have confidence in their impact on the team. Other parts of the survey, such as this, the top 5 and the bottom 5, indicated the patterns again. We noticed, for example, several of the individuals in the team leader survey had particular strengths in one of the 3 dimensions, role modelling, team enabling, or supportive responding. This particular respondent, for example, had strengths largely in role modelling, and they had some development areas in team enabling. It's the same person as the previous slide. So if this person doesn't have confidence in their own ability, what you see here is they have a challenge in team enabling, which is actually in some ways projecting themselves onto the team and injecting themselves into third-party engagements to reinforce team psychological safety. So there's some real consistency between constantly over or underrating themselves and their ability to either role model or to enable the team. And we found that that was quite interesting. And this is the same person's radar chart. And as you can see, team enabling broadly, and I think fairly clearly, is the smallest area of the 5. So it's sort of another way of demonstrating that they are less willing or able to inject themselves into the team to promote psychological safety if they're not actually engaged in as one of the two parties in any particular risky undertaking. And this is the consolidated result of the OSS senior leadership team. So the previous results were actually the team leader of the OSS senior leadership team. You can see somewhat of a spread between strongly agree and disagree somewhat. And one of the things that we found is that the individual results for the TPS for Leader survey provided some great data for us to coach this individual. And what we found is the team survey gave us, if you like, an insight into the team needs, and the individual survey gave us an insight into some of the drivers of the individual. We're starting to bring those together quite powerfully in coaching as part of this overall program. So this combination of the TPS surveys, the team and leader, has been a powerful diagnostic and very helpful from a coaching and individual development perspective. The debriefing. Once you've done the surveys, obviously the debriefing is pretty important. One of the things that we discovered, and I think we got this a little bit wrong initially, was we did all the surveys and we did a debrief of the senior leadership team, and there was a little bit of a delay before getting to the subordinate teams, the teams of each of the members of the senior leadership team. And the risk that we realised we were running is that they might run off and try and take action based on the debrief, unless we scheduled an action planning session shortly afterwards. So we have now done that, but initially we started doing the surveys and then the debrief. And while we were focusing on taking action with the senior leadership team, we realised that the subordinate teams were starting to get a bit twitchy, and we needed to give them some guidance. Initially, the guidance was stop, don't do anything until we get back to you. So we think a good idea would be to schedule it so that you do the senior leadership teams first. And if there are subordinate teams, give the senior leadership time to absorb, start taking some action, and then you can integrate the action of the subordinate teams into the senior leadership team actions. We also made a practice of debriefing each team leader separately and first, so that they were given their TPS for leader debrief and their team's debrief before any of their team got the debrief about the team. In a couple of cases, some of the team leaders were quite surprised by the results, and we needed to talk to them a bit about how to make sense of constructively the results that they had. And as a result, they were able to help us with their team debriefs. Had we not done the debriefs with them individually first, I suspect we might have had some difficulties engaging with the teams as effectively as we did. The other thing is that teams like to work well together. In Australia, there seems to be a belief that we're all great team workers. And so when you come to them with a TPS debrief, some of them are quite shocked to realise that there's some improvement that they could make. One of the avoidance techniques that we often see in a team is they start trying to question the validity of the tool. And we find that one of the things in Australia that they do is they start to say, well, you know, the definitions are wrong. Reaction to mistakes. We don't like the way that you defined it. So there's no validity in the survey. So really, we're a good team. It's just the survey that's wrong. That very much may be an Australian thing, but what we found is that it helped to be very clear on the definitions so that the validity of the survey could not be used as an excuse to avoid having to confront the reality of where the team was. This is a slide that we found helpful in the first instance to make sure people understood what it was that they were getting results for. The other thing, and Peter's been pretty clear on this too, that there is some research about the validity of the survey and the reliability of the survey. If I had my time again, I would go back and have that data with me, because every group has two or three people that are scientific, boffiny, they like to argue the point. So having the data about the validity of the tool, I think, is helpful. Don't often need it, but when you do, it's really valuable. Um, the other thing is the traffic light graphic. People react to red. And Peter, you know that it's relative. Each team has something in the green and each team has something in the red. Most of the teams we debriefed didn't like thinking that there was anything in the red. So just be ready. Red looks bad, and it's really useful and important to tell them that every team has something in the green and something in the red. And that relativity of the way that the data is presented is important for the teams to understand. So, any team that looked at this would say, okay, we've got a problem with diversity. In this case, it's not a great score, but we've had some teams whose lowest score is in the mid fives and it's still in the red. So it makes it fairly easy to accept if you realise the relativity of the bottom left and top right. And after the survey, there's a little technique that we've used. It's an analogy about the elements and the foundations as per here. We talk about the elements as the dials and flashing lights on the dashboard of a car. So that's what you measure and that's what you look at to see whether or not there's work to do and, the state of the team. Sitting beneath that are the foundations, and we refer to those with our groups as the engine under the hood. So you look at the dashboard, the elements, and then if you see something of interest in there, you pop the hood and have a look at the engine underneath, and that's where you make the adjustments. That's where you do the work. We find that that's really helpful to stop teams from racing off and trying to somehow improve embracing diversity without first understanding how the five foundations might be contributing to it. So we use the phrase, well, let's pop the hood and see what might be contributing to any of the elements that you're getting. And that's just something that we do here in Australia, and it seems to be getting some traction. And finally, as I said before, when you get into action, we're learning the hard way. It's best to start with the senior team. And if they have subordinate teams that also do the survey, get the senior team on board and working first. Then you can enlist them as champions to support your work with any subordinate teams. We initially started doing them all at once, and it got a little bit hectic, and we've had to pull back a little bit, slow the subordinate teams down, and get traction with the senior executive team first. And that, Peter, is it news from Australia?
Thank you a lot, Don. News from Australia, great work. I agree with what Mark writes in the chat box. I'm gonna make a few comments. If anybody has a question, please, I suggest you put them in the chat box, and then we can do that before we take the picture.
Yeah.
So a few things you mentioned a few times, Don. Maybe this is specific to Australia, but actually it's not. I think everything you mentioned, I have heard somewhere else.
Yeah.
People react to the red. People will challenge the definitions, etc., etc. So I don't think it's specific to any country. So it's a good sharing that all of us can then say, well, maybe if I use this with some team, I can be faced with the same questions or challenges. I really like, because I think you are the first, as far as I know, who have really combined at the same time TPS for leader and TPS for team. And you've been very creative in using both reports to kind of enhance one another or each other. So kudos for that, because I don't think there's other cases that have done that yet. I also like a lot the starting with the senior leadership team and then involving the subordinate teams and making care of the timing so that people, on the one hand, don't have to wait or don't want to rush into anything. Cool. I'm gonna see what up. So hang on, help me here. Great to talk about. So I think that so far I see questions. Sorry, I see comments. Not so much questions, but I really like everything you shared. Thanks a lot. Give me a few seconds. I once had a leader who did not allow me to bring the results to his team. Yes, I remember that case, Nelson. Yeah, when there's red and everything, some people react a little bit maybe emotionally to that. But you're also very right. And I say this so often in the Q&A at the end of the program, every team has red and every team has green.
Mm,
But you really lived it, right?
mm,
When people, you can explain all that, but people kind of naturally jump to the red and sometimes only look at that and sometimes
mm,
react, etc., etc. So all good stuff. Okay, there we go. After I've been yapping a bit, we're gonna do just two questions. How will you measure progress and hold them accountable at the end of the 11 months?
Mm.
Um, I think there's two things. There's the surveys will be repeated at the end of the program, probably about 3 months after we finish the program. And the sponsors of the program agreed to use the TPS for Leader as the baseline for any improvement in leadership effectiveness. We'll let you know how that goes, but that was the agreement that allowed us to do the surveys in the first place.
Mm,
Then, of course, there's the sort of less tangible organisational effectiveness that there's a number of internal organisational measures that they'll be looking at that will measure the effectiveness overall. But from a data perspective, it's TPS for Leader and TPS for Teams. We're repeating both of them.
mm.
And the idea is that leadership strengthens and TPS improves.
Cool.
Mm,
And maybe not everybody's familiar, but every time when we do the follow-up report, we have the updated version of the report you all know, the report
mm,
that Don has used. But there's also a specific one page before and after. I'm not sure if everybody knows about that. So that'll be exciting, Don
mm.
and Sarah, to see
Yeah.
that in a few months. I'm just gonna, this is not very fair, but what is one most powerful learning you have from this so far? What is the most powerful lesson you have learned? If you have to pick one, you shared a few.
Mm,
Can I answer that?
Yes, of course.
You can hear me.
yeah.
For me, it's the emotion that comes out in the reaction to seeing the results. I think um, for us, I said to Don, we're used to seeing these results. So from a facilitation perspective, we're very attuned to, what they mean and how to position them. But we've always got to put ourselves in the shoes of someone who is seeing it for the first time and is protective, understandably, of their team or, even of their, if it's a leader seeing their results for the first time. So it's just really stepping into that appreciation that they are going to potentially feel emotive and not hiding from that, but really stepping into it with them and having empathy, but also being quite clear that this is what this means. You're
Mm,
not a terrible team, you're an
mm,
amazing team, but everybody has work to do, and that's okay. So I think for me that's probably been the biggest learning is allowing that emotion to come out and then
mm.
working with it.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna go for one more question. I know this is not fair. I'm gonna combine it. Why did you pick TPS? Because Don and Sarah are very experienced team experts, coaches, whatever is the right term, and you've been doing this for 20 years. So why did you pick TPS? And I'm going to connect it with the other question from Kavita. What was the challenge of the organization that made you choose TPS amongst all the other approaches you could have
Yeah,
looked for?
yeah, yeah. Did you want
Um, with the experience that we have behind us, we've come to understand that the inability to have the conversations that matters has almost nothing to do with skill. Everybody's done courses on how to have difficult conversations, how to give and receive feedback. What makes the difference is psychological safety. And so, what we wanted to do was to get people in touch with a measure of what really makes the difference and then start a conversation about the less tangible aspects of organisations, like the safety to have the conversation as opposed to the ability to have the conversation. Um, we use a phrase, the things that are never on the management meeting agenda. There's always finance, risk, There's always restructuring and strategy, but trust, psychological safety, relationship management, those sort of things are never on it. And so I love that this gives people a language that hopefully will start appearing in a leadership team meeting agenda going forward.
Excellent. I promise you, I will ask the other questions to Don and Sarah separately by email, and I'll get some answers to you. Okay. But I have some more things to share, and I want to kind of be respectful of everybody's time. Thank you, Don and Sarah. It's now almost midnight where you are. So,
It's 10:30.
10:30.
oh, is it?
No,
Oh, my
that's
bad. Oh, my
yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
My bad. My
Yeah.
bad. So this is time for the picture. I'm going to ask you to what do you call switch on your video, because if you don't have your video on, you will not be on the picture. So I'll give you 30 seconds wherever you are. Yes, we all look either too early, too late, or something in between, in the car, on the beach. There we go. I think I have most of you. The hair's okay, Leona. Yes, I can take the picture now. All right. 1, 2, 3. Let's do one more. 1, 2, 3. I hope you're not driving yourself, Kavita. And if you do, you can switch your camera off again. So I want to move on again. Big thanks for Don and Sarah. This is really useful to see people using the tools, using the methodology. Really appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to move on to a few more things I want to share. So thank you for that. We've done the picture. Now, before I go to the next case study, I want to share a little quick update, 2 minutes, about the website. I talked about this 3 months ago. It's been an interesting but difficult journey, but now we are ready. So those of you who have been certified in the last month and a half or so are automatically registered on this platform. If you're not, you need to send me an email and I will register you. So you will get a platform, a profile on this platform. You will with login information with a dashboard. I'm not going to go through all the steps. I think it's better to do that once you want to use it. The main thing you need to look for is once you've logged in, look for the guides. There's a section called guides where you will find videos, short videos, 2 minutes to 5 minutes on how to log in for the first time, but you get this information as part of the first email, how to order surveys and reports, how to launch a TPS for Team survey, etc., etc. It should give you almost full freedom to launch a survey when you want and to follow up the status of your survey. And so it's really only for the last 2 weeks we've started to use it, but the first people who have started to use it seems to be happy. These are the first comments of the people I received who've launched surveys through the platform. So if you are needing a survey, if you're not yet on the platform, send me an email and I will create your profile. The other thing I want to share with you is that, as I said earlier, we have a lot of data. A lot of people talk about team psychological safety. A lot of people talk and write about psychological safety. I think one of the strengths of our approach is that everything is data focused. I discovered, Sarah a few minutes ago in the chat said that they used Claude to help identify themes from the verbatim. And I also discovered Claude 3 weeks ago. And I spent a lot of time to start to analyze all this data I have, which in the past were not really used. And I'm just here to give you a peek preview. I think the first report should come out this week. So I will be creating some either executive summary documents or white papers to share the information we have so far. And the first one I'm going to show you is country comparisons. I often have this question, yes, but we're in Brazil, we're in Russia, we're in Vietnam. How is team psychological safety in our country different than other countries? And until now, I didn't have a lot of answers for that. But this is one slide of the overview white paper I am finalizing. This will be an example where I looked at those countries where I have more than 20 teams, more than 20, to make the analysis meaningful. And so you can see here the UK, Brazil, Thailand, Russia, Netherlands, Poland, Vietnam. And then to see how each of the 7 elements kind of are lower or higher. This is just one of the analyses, right? There's much more that's behind this, but how each of the elements show up differently in the different countries. And for example, when you see a little star, a little asterisk, that means this is statistically significant. So typically in this kind of analysis, we only look at those numbers with a star. For example, one observation you can make here is that for Brazil, all the teams we have there are relatively lower when it comes to risks, asking for help, mutual support, appreciation, than the whole data set, right? In Thailand, for example, it's especially the element of reaction to mistakes. In Vietnam, accepting diversity. But we can also look at the green. Poland, for example, has 3 green values with a star, with an asterisk. That means that Poland is, on average, compared to other countries in the data set, relatively higher. Okay, this is just to give you a taste. Now, don't ask me why that is. The only thing we do is to analyze the data. It's then up to you to try to make good use of that in your context with your teams. Okay, I don't have the underlying reasons, but I'm just showing you a snapshot here because I have, we also analyze the verbatim, etc., etc. Another interesting graph I want to show is that this is to support my statement that I often make that teams eat culture for breakfast, to say that different teams in the same organization can look very different. And this is for, I don't know how many different teams there are here. I think 16 different teams. So this is organization C in Brazil, where we measured 12 teams. So the same company where we measured 12 teams, or Brazil, Thailand, Brazil. I think there's Australia, so you will recognize this one, Don and Sarah. Organization Australia, we measured 5 teams. And every time we looked at the average, so if you would measure team psychological safety in this organization, you would find on average the blue dot. But if you look at how each of those different teams shows up, that's the different dots that you can see along this line, right? So in this one, for example, it's quite extreme, goes from pretty low to very, very high. So this is just an example of the analyses I'm doing now to show that we need to be careful when we look at the topic of psychological safety. It's really, it lives at the team level. I know I've repeated this many times to many of you, but it's good to have real data here. And yes, there are some cases here at the bottom, 2 or 3 organizations in Brazil and 1 in Thailand or the UK, where actually it seems that the teams do have a similar level of psychological safety, but we just cannot generalize that to all, okay? This is to give you a taste of what is to come under the form of white papers or executive summaries. So I hope to be sharing that in the next weeks with all of you, and it's up to you to make the best use of it, okay? I didn't have time to look at the comments. I will do that in a minute because now I will go to the second case study. And this is a bit different. I've never done this. I hope it works because Tom is not here. Tom could not join, but he was happy to share, to record his case. So I'm going to start a video, but it's a video with slides and just the sound of Tom. It's 13 minutes, 1-3. So I'm going to start. You can ask questions, but Tom is not here to answer. I can see if I can get his answers later. He will talk about TPS for leader, and he will also talk about action learning. Now, some of you know action learning, some don't. So action learning is a team-based, let's say, problem-solving approach that is one kind of team coaching. Okay, so that's it for the introduction. Mark, you're the first on my screen. Can you give a thumbs up if you hear the sound in the video, please? Okay, let's start the video.
Hey everybody, this is Tom from Poland. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. So I will just say that I work as an affiliate director of the World Institute for Action Learning. So I use action learning very much. I teach action learning, but I also use the TPS concept both when running Peter's program, Certified TPS Practitioner, and I also use it in leadership development. In this case, I will be describing how I used TPS for Leaders survey in a leadership development program here in Poland. So I will go through, I think, 4 slides. I will start with the very beginning, so the inquiry that I got from the company. And I will finish with what is happening now and my learning. I'm not giving the name of the company. but still I would like all of you to keep this information for yourselves, because you never know who is watching, who's reading things on LinkedIn and so on. And I'm doing this only for your benefit, for your learning, because if I were in your shoes, I would like somebody like myself who has done it to share the process and the learning. But this is not to use in LinkedIn posts and certain brochures and so on and so forth. Okay, so the inquiry was that an international telco company based mainly in Western Europe, but also here in Poland, having an office here in Poland, wanted to develop their mid-level managers. About 28, but eventually around 21 or 22 people took part in the program. So mid-level managers who work mostly on site. Some of them work in different cities, but we met mostly on site, almost exclusively on site. Very, very little online work that actually was done primarily in the preparation for the program, not in the program. So the goals, the inquiry, the objectives, we as HR, we want to, that's what they said, we want to consolidate them, improve cooperation between them so there is less silo work, and also develop them as leaders and better problem solvers. So, I heard two categories. One category was about making that group more consolidated and improving communication and cooperation between them, so they become a group that is more solid and working together. And the other category was about developing their competences as team leaders, as problem solvers, as decision makers, also as people who take accountability for their work. So once I got this inquiry, I prepared an offer in which I included the idea of using the TPS for Leaders report. So my initial idea was that we will use primarily action learning sessions for this program. But at the beginning and at the end of the program, we will run the TPS for Leaders report so that the leaders get the feedback from their teams and they can assess themselves and compare these two assessments. Because during the program, during the action learning sessions, we will also be looking at their skills that also relate to team development, team leading. And if we speak about team leading, we are also speaking about creating team psychological safety. So that was my train of thought. So I did talk to HR, recognized their point of view and the needs that they are seeing and what is important for them. Then I suggested that we find an ambassador. So a top-level manager who is a flexible person who communicates well, who will support this program, and who can dial in during the first meeting, maybe come to the last meeting, and we can, encourage him to say a few words about participation in this program to create the fact that it is important for the company that people take part in the program. I hope this is clear. Found an ambassador like that. I talked to him, and I had a separate meeting with that person online. Then I prepared roughly the idea of the program. So doing the surveys at the beginning, at the end, some action learning sessions. But I prepared this and I did talk to a few of the end participants. I talked to them online for about 20 minutes to present this idea to them and to get feedback. What they think about the whole idea. What they think I should do to encourage their colleagues to take part in the program, what risks they're seeing, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I got some feedback and the reception of the idea was good, and still I got some tips that I did include. Through doing this, I could then say, some of your colleagues took part in the creation of the program. They did give feedback. So then I present the whole program as something that was co-created rather than imposed on people. And then we had a kickoff that was online in only 30 minutes. So very short, And it involved basically 3 stages. The ladies from HR said about how they are seeing the program and what is important for them in it. Then I presented the entire structure and the goals and what is important from my point of view, what the objectives are. And then at the end, the ambassador also said a few words. So we set up all the dates so that people can mark those dates in their calendars. So everything from beginning to end was planned time-wise up front. And then I prepared communication to the participants and to their managers. So the project really had, or has had, because it's still going on, 5 stages. So stage 1, HR sends TPS for leaders surveys to the teams and to the leaders. During the online kickoff, they learned about the survey. They also had time, by the way, the leaders had time to inform their teams that the survey will come, because it's important that the leader does it, because if a team member gets the survey link just out of the blue, they may be surprised not knowing what it's all about. So HR sends TPS for leaders survey links, and we give about a week, maybe 10 or 11 days to fill out the survey. I get the reports, I print them out, right? So I have the printed reports for people. And then we had 2-day workshop in 2 groups. So each group had like from 10 to 12 people. So during the 2-day workshops, first they learned about TPS, about teams and TPS. I presented the idea of effective teamwork, some studies on teams, then the concept of TPS and studies on TPS. So when the very term team psychological safety appeared, this was the first time it appeared. I did not use the term team psychological safety before. So when it appeared, it was instantaneously linked to team effectiveness and team norms and team cooperation. And then eventually, after, 15 minutes or 20 minutes of my presentation, I said, and this fundamental trait of teamwork is called team psychological safety. And that's how I guided them to the idea of the report. And I also showed them on slides how to read the graphs. And I did it in a very, very simple way. I only had 3 slides. So 1 graph presenting modeling so that they know how to read, what is the gray square and what this purple diamond means. Then I showed the final graph, the radar graph, so that they understand how to read that one. And I think I also showed the table that presents numbers, right? And then I said, everything else is basically described. So go ahead and read from back to back this report. It's not too long. This will help you in understanding this. The entire first day was devoted to TPS and how a leader can improve TPS. And then the second day was an introduction to action learning. And then once a month, we had 4 action learning sessions. So if the 2-day workshops took place November and December 2025, so then from January to April, each person, and they worked in smaller groups, 7 to 8 people groups, something like that, in 3 groups. They had 4 action learning sessions. Right now we are in May, so all of the groups are through all the action learning sessions. HR again sent TPS for Leader follow-up surveys. People are filling the surveys as we speak right now. The end of May, we will meet for a 4-hour session, summarizing, and we will meet together, basically collect all the learning from the program. They will have a chance to get the follow-up reports and go through them, analyze their work, maybe talk to their peers about what happened during these 6 months. So that's the whole process. And I will wrap up with my learning. And I have 5 points. So number 1 is involve the end participants. Just like I said, it really makes sense to talk to the end participants because they will give you feedback and they will help co-create this program. And then you can later on say, hey, this was co-created with some of you. Number two is be careful with the ambassador. In this case, it turned out that they really did not need the ambassador, and actually the ambassadors, because eventually there were a couple of them, they did not so good work. They more discouraged the participants rather than encouraged them. Through the language that they used, I think they had really noble intentions, but the communications from the ambassadors was not entirely supportive for the group. So really, the idea of the ambassador is really important, can be really useful, but now I see that I need to be careful. Number three, if you run action learning by the way, action learning is a really good tool to work on TPS and to work on competencies. But it's good to enrich those sessions with maybe some additional tools and questions for reflection. So I always began my session, except for recognizing what actions and learning there is from challenges that were described before that session. I gave 1 or 2 questions just for reflection about the work as a manager, as a team leader, and I did provide them with some simple techniques for facilitating good problem solving and team meetings. Number 4, ask people to focus on a chosen skill in everyday life. As you may know, people in action learning practice their skills during the sessions, but I also do encourage them to choose a skill, practice in their everyday work, and then during the subsequent sessions, they report how they did on that skill. And number 5, be prepared for surprises during the action learning sessions. In one action learning session, the problem presenter couldn't come. And then what? Then you can look for a problem in the team to discuss. But sometimes people just don't have challenges to discuss or are not ready. So have some backup activities that you can offer to people that are within the action learning realm. Okay, I hope this makes sense. I hope I described it fairly clearly. And I hope you can use this knowledge to design programs like this for yourselves and for your teams. And all the best, good luck, and take good care. Greetings from Poland.
Thank you, Tom, even if he cannot hear us. And so again, big thanks to both Don and Sarah and Tom. Round of applause, virtual round of applause. And I'm sure that that's not the reason they raised their hand, but that's part of the deal. If you share, whoever shares a case study, short, long, something in between, you get 1 free TPS report, just to express my appreciation. If there's any questions, put them in the chat box. I will see with Tom to get answers to you. I want to highlight one thing that I heard both from Don and Tom is about how you introduce TPS in an organization, right? Tom made it very explicit. He started to talk about teams and high performance teams and et cetera, the importance of the leader on the dynamic of the team. And then he said, oh, and this is this thing called team psychological safety. And I think Don somewhere did the same. And I just want to contrast that with another example I had from Poland. Just 2 weeks ago, somebody said, well, we talked to our CEO to launch a team psychological safety program, and he didn't like it. And we're stuck. And I feel sorry for them. But at the same time, I think we should remind ourselves and the people we work with that we're not doing team psychological safety. We are doing team performance, team effectiveness, team culture, whatever you call it. That is why we do team psychological safety. So I think this is a good reminder of what I like to say during the sessions. I have 2 more things. I plan to go in breakout groups. It's going to happen next time. It's not going to work today. So just a reminder, 2 reminders. If you need to get access to the new website and the platform, if you're a newly certified practitioner for the last month and a half or so, you already are in the platform. If you're not, send me an email and I will take care of it, and you can do everything you want on the platform. And finally, our next session is 24 August. You will be reminded. I will stop talking now. We officially have like 2 minutes left. If anybody has a comment or a thought, now is the time to unmute, and we can go until the last person has left the call. So if anybody wants to say something, ask something, etc., feel free to do so now.
Peter, this was, as usual, wonderful meeting, full of practical knowledge. Thank you, Don, and thank you, Sarah, for really, really matter case. I learned a lot, and also you answered, by the way, some of my questions, how to cope with some situations. So thank you again.
Cool. And thanks for that. And it also reminds me, everybody has asked to keep it confidential, both Tom and Sarah and Don. We're not here to talk about Australia fire guards, right? It's about the program, how you can introduce this with a potential client. So keep the actual topic, a context confidential. Jane, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I'm wondering if anyone else, I loved what you said about introducing it's about team performance and then using the term team psychological safety. I mean, as coaches, I love the word team psychological safety, but does anybody find that some of these executives, the minute they hear the word psychological, they get all like scared or something, like you're going to do therapy on them or on their company, and they really don't understand. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that, on how to get by that sort of blocker sometimes when you're trying to sell the idea to a company.
I will see if somebody wants to raise their hand. I'm going to say something, Jane. I'm going to share with you a blog I wrote some time ago. Once somebody asked me, because people are confronted with the same, psychological seems very HR-ish. Safety seems like passive, right? So many people don't connect well with that term. And I have come up with a different term because and I called it, because if you look at the definition of team psychological safety, it's about taking interpersonal risks. And that in itself already sounds very different than psychological safety. So I came up with a new word just for the fun, just for us, calling it productive interpersonal risk taking. Now, I don't think I will convince Edmondson to change the terminology, but Jane, and then I'll give the microphone to Phil. I have literally done a program with clients without talking about team psychological safety. I talked about team learning. I talk about the 7 elements and the foundations and team performance. I do not use the word team psychological safety because for us, it's all cool and great. I think it has a heavy meaning for some of the people out there. Phil, you're going to add something.
Yeah, it's a very important point. I mean, I had some great help from Peter because I had a team once who said, "We love the program, let's do the program, but please don't call it psychological safety." Peter helped me a lot because we were able to take out the word psychology. And it's the same reason that people think if the competitors knew they were doing team psychological safety, they think there was something wrong with the team. So what I've done subsequently, I introduce a talk about what psychological means before I even mention the team. And I actually ask them to think about their own family and discuss with each other what's good psychology in their own family and bad psychology. So we take away some of the fear of it actually being used in the program because everybody really understands it, but you've got to get them to talk about it to show that it's normal to look at the psychology of how you're doing things. But I agree with you. Sometimes it's scary for people.
Thank you. That's great.
Correct. And also what I want to highlight, in the survey, we nowhere mention psychological or safety or team psychological safety. We don't say, hey, we will do a survey about this. We say we have 7 statements, open-ended questions, etc., etc. So yes, be careful. Again, the example in Poland, I feel this was an in-house program where they had 6 or 7 people certified. They were all very enthusiastic, ran to the CEO, started to talk about team psychological safety, and he said, I'm not interested. So be careful about that terminology. Yes, good point, Jane.
Thank you.
Okay, who else is fresh enough to ask a question? Nancy, do you recognize something behind me?
Oh, sure.
Right?
Lovely. Yes, thank
This is my
you.
souvenir from Nancy from Brazil.
Oh,
Okay,
thank you. I'm
we
happy
are
to know that.
Yes, it's on my shelf. Thank you all for joining. Again, thanks for I think that's make the difference, right? I can talk for an hour, I can talk for 2 hours, but I think really the key is to have these cases shared. So great examples, and I'll try to make sure we have some more for the next edition. Thank you all. Next session is in August. You'll be invited somewhere. So all the best, be good, be happy, and have a good week. Thank you all.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye-bye.